I walked into the restaurant with my head held high. The hostess smiled warmly, recognizing me instantly. My father, Richard Bennett, sat at our usual corner table, his reading glasses perched on his nose as he studied the wine list with the intensity of someone avoiding conversation. My mother, Patricia, adjusted her pearl necklace nervously, always the mediator between us. They hadn't seen me in 8 months. Not since I walked out of our last family dinner, leaving behind half-eaten steak and years of unspoken resentment. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Olivia, you're late, my father said without looking up. No hello, no how are you. Just criticism packaged as observation. Classic Richard Bennett style. I checked my watch, actually 5 minutes early, but correcting him would only fuel whatever lecture he had prepared. I slid into my seat, smoothing my blazer, the one I'd bought after my first major business deal. It was my armor tonight. Sorry about that. Traffic, I lied, the path of least resistance. My mother reached across the table, squeezing my hand. You look tired, honey. Are you sleeping enough? Before I could answer, the waiter approached. Young, professional, notepad ready. Good evening, welcome to Castellino's. Can I start you with some? He stopped mid-sentence, his eyes widening slightly as he recognized me. Ms. Reynolds. Welcome back. The usual table was taken tonight. But we're honored to have you again. How is everything at Horizon Innovations? My father's head snapped up, wine list forgotten. Everything's wonderful, thank you, Jake, I replied, surprised he remembered my name. The team misses your regular lunches here. The board meeting went well last week? I nodded, feeling my father's gaze boring into me. Of course, CEO perks, right? I'll bring your usual sparkling water with lime. Jake smiled and walked away, unaware of the bomb he'd just detonated. The silence that followed was thick enough to cut with the butter knife my mother was now clutching like a lifeline. CEO? My father's voice was quiet, dangerous. What exactly is he talking about, Olivia? And just like that, the careful facade I'd maintained for 3 years crumbled in an instant. My secret success exposed by a well-meaning waiter who had no idea of the storm he'd unleashed. Let me tell you how I got here. My name is Olivia Reynolds. I'm 32 years old and the founder and CEO of Horizon Innovations, a technology company currently valued at just over $75 million. I have an MBA from Stanford, a corner office with a view of the city skyline, and 87 employees who respect me. And until tonight, my own parents had no idea. You're probably wondering why a successful businesswoman would hide her achievements from her family. The answer isn't simple, but it starts the way many stories do, with a father who could never see past his own expectations. I grew up in Westbrook, a small town where ambition was measured in modest increments. My father, Richard Bennett, built a respectable accounting firm from scratch. A self-made man who never let anyone forget it. My mother, Patricia, abandoned her own career in teaching to support his, a sacrifice that became the unspoken blueprint for what was expected of the women in our family. From my earliest memories, I knew my place in their world. My older brother, Thomas, was groomed to take over the family business. I was expected to get a sensible degree, marry well, and perhaps work part-time until children came along. My father called it practical planning. I called it suffocation. Olivia has her head in the clouds, my father would say at dinner parties, his laugh jovial but his eyes hard. Always dreaming instead of doing. But what he saw as daydreaming was actually planning. Every business book borrowed from the library. Every internship application, every late-night learning coding while he thought I was chatting with friends, they were all steps on a path only I could see. When I got accepted to Stanford with a partial scholarship, he called it unnecessarily expensive. When I chose business over accounting, he deemed it risky. And when I turned down his offer to join the family firm, the word failure entered his vocabulary for me. You're making a mistake, he said the night before I left for California. Thomas is already managing accounts. You could learn the ropes, have stability. I want to build something of my own, I replied. He shook his head. The business world will eat you alive. You don't have the temperament for it. What does that mean? You're too sensitive, Olivia. Too emotional. Business requires toughness. His words should have crushed me, but instead, they crystallized something I'd felt for years. The problem wasn't that I dreamed too much, it was that he dreamed too little. For me, at least. preparing, and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I left for Stamford the next day with 2 suitcases and a determination that burned like a pilot. Light, steady, unwavering, and just waiting for the right moment to ignite. College was liberation. For the first time, my ideas weren't met with dismissive chuckles or concerned glances. Professors pushed me. Classmates challenged me. Mentors saw potential where my father had only seen limitations. I thrived in the competitive environment, graduating near the top of my class. When most of my peers headed to established firms or prestigious consulting positions, I took a risk. Together with my roommate, Zoe, and our friend Marcus, we developed a software platform that helped small businesses streamline their operations. Our first office was Zoe's garage in Palo Alto. We lived on ramen and ambition, working 18-hour days and sleeping on air mattresses between coding sessions. The first year was brutal. We nearly went bankrupt twice. Investors laughed us out of rooms. But we kept refining, adapting, pushing. All the while, my parents thought I had taken a modest job at a tech company. During our weekly calls, my mother would ask about work, and I'd give vague answers about projects and the team. My father rarely asked at all, except to inquire when I planned to settle into something stable. I came home for holidays with practiced stories about a fictional boss and office politics that never existed. I downplayed everything, worried that any success I mentioned would be dismissed as exaggeration or luck. It was easier to be the daughter with the decent job than to face the scrutiny of being the daughter who dared to lead. Then came our breakthrough. A venture capitalist who had rejected us twice saw our updated platform at a tech conference and was impressed by how we'd evolved. He offered us $2 million in funding with favorable terms. Overnight, Horizon Innovations became a legitimate startup with real potential. We moved to actual offices, hired our first employees, expanded our product line. Each milestone should have been something to share proudly with my family, but the habit of downplaying my achievements was too ingrained. "How's work?" my mother would ask during our calls. "Fine. Busy. How's Dad's back? Is he still seeing that chiropractor?" I became skilled at deflection, turning conversations away from my rapidly growing company and back to the comfortable territory of hometown gossip and family matters. 3 years passed. Horizon grew from 10 employees to 50, then 87. We secured major clients, won innovation awards, and finally became profitable. I bought a beautiful apartment overlooking the bay, but whenever my parents visited, I made excuses about why we couldn't stop by my place. Being renovated, I'd say, or it's a mess right now. Instead, I'd book them at nice hotels and meet them for dinner, always keeping my 2 worlds carefully separated. In California, I was CEO Olivia Reynolds, confident and commanding. In my hometown, I was just Olivia, Richard's daughter who had a job in tech. It was exhausting, maintaining the facade. Sometimes I'd catch myself wondering why I bothered. But deep down, I knew. I was afraid. Not of my father's disapproval, I'd grown accustomed to that. I was afraid of his dismissal. Afraid he would attribute my success to luck or connections. Or anything other than my own abilities. Afraid that even with all I had built, he would still see the little girl who dreamed too much. The breaking point came last Christmas. I had flown home for the annual Bennett family gathering, leaving behind a company in the middle of our biggest acquisition to date. I spent most of the visit sneaking away to handle urgent calls, giving whispered approvals to legal documents while hiding in my childhood bedroom. At dinner, surrounded by extended family, my father raised his glass for a toast. To Thomas, he beamed, clapping my brother on the shoulder, who just landed the Peterson account, our firm's biggest client to date. "This is what dedication looks like, everyone. Following through on your commitments. Building something real." The table erupted in congratulations. My mother squeezed my hand under the table, her silent way of acknowledging the sting. Later, as we cleared dishes, my aunt asked about my job. "Olivia works in computers," my father answered before I could speak. "Some tech company in California. Still finding her footing, but that's how it is these days with young people. They need time to settle down, figure out what they want." I stood there, plates in hand, struck by the absurdity. I had just closed a deal worth $11 million. That morning, hiding in the pantry while on a conference call, I managed a team larger than our entire extended family. I had found my footing years ago, but he couldn't see it because I had never made him look. That night, I made a decision. No more hiding. No more diminishing myself to fit into the small box he had designed for me. I would tell them everything during my next visit home. But months passed, and somehow the right moment never presented itself. Work became all-consuming as we prepared for a possible IPO. My visits home grew shorter and less frequent. The gap between my real life and the version my parents knew widened until they felt like entirely different realities. Then came tonight. A simple dinner at Castellino's, a high-end restaurant in my hometown where I often held business meetings when visiting local clients. I hadn't realized the staff would recognize me. Hadn't considered that my carefully constructed worlds might collide so unexpectedly. CEO, my father repeated, his voice harder now. Of what exactly? My mother's eyes darted between us, sensing the tension. Richard, let's just enjoy our dinner. I'm sure Olivia has her reasons. No, he cut her off. I want to hear this. My daughter apparently runs a company I've never heard of, is recognized by waitstaff at restaurants we've been coming to for years, and has been what, lying to us? Is this some kind of joke, Olivia? The restaurant suddenly felt too warm, too small. Other diners glanced our way, sensing the rising tension. This was not how I had planned this revelation. Not in public, not caught off guard, not defensive from the start. But maybe there would never be a perfect moment. Maybe the truth was always going to be messy and uncomfortable. I took a deep breath. It's not a joke. I'm the CEO and founder of Horizon Innovations. We develop enterprise software solutions for businesses. We have offices in San Francisco and Austin. We employ 87 people. And yes, I've been omitting certain details about my career. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. Olivia, why wouldn't you tell us something like that? My father's expression hardened. This isn't possible. You don't have the experience to run a company. And there it was. Not surprise. Not hurt at being kept in the dark. Just immediate disbelief and dismissal. I've been running it for 5 years, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. We're valued at $75 million. I built it from nothing. With what money? He challenged. We didn't give you startup capital. With student loans, credit card debt, and eventually venture funding. We nearly went bankrupt twice before we found our footing. So it was luck, he said, leaning back. Right place, right time. I felt something snap inside me. Years of diminishing myself, of swallowing my achievements, of accepting his narrow view of my potential, it all rose to the surface. No, I said firmly. It wasn't luck. It was work. Endless, exhausting work. Nights sleeping on office floors. Learning to code when everyone else was partying. Building a business plan that 15 investors rejected before one said yes. Creating something from nothing except an idea and the determination to see it through. Jake returned with our waters, sensed the tension, and quickly retreated. My father waited until he was out of earshot before continuing. If what you're saying is true, why keep it secret? What kind of daughter hides her entire life from her parents? The question hung in the air between us. My mother looked at me with hurt in her eyes, and for a moment, guilt threatened to overwhelm me. But then I remembered all the dismissive comments, the lowered expectations, the assumptions about my capabilities that had followed me from childhood. The kind who grew tired of being told she was dreaming too big, I answered quietly. The kind who knew that no matter what she achieved, it would never be enough in your eyes. My father scoffed. That's ridiculous. We've always supported you. You've tolerated me, I corrected. There's a difference. You supported Thomas because he followed your path. You tolerated me because I insisted on forging my own. This is absurd, he said, voice rising. We gave you everything. Paid for your education, half, I interrupted. You paid half of my undergraduate degree. I worked part-time and took out loans for the rest. And my MBA was entirely on me. So this is about money? You're successful now and want to throw it in our faces? No, I said, fighting to keep my voice level. This isn't about money at all. It's about respect. It's about the fact that for years, you've talked about me like I'm still finding myself, like I'm drifting without purpose. Even tonight, you started this dinner by calling me a failure. I did not, you said, and I quote, another dead end job, Olivia? When are you going to stop failing and start committing to something real? That was literally the first thing you said to me after I sat down. My mother interjected, he didn't mean it that way, dear. He's just concerned about your future. I turned to her, suddenly aware that her constant mediation had enabled this dynamic for years. Mom, I am my future. I've built it while you both weren't looking. Or maybe while you were looking but couldn't see. The silence that followed was deafening. Around us, The restaurant continued its elegant hum of conversation and clinking glasses, oblivious to the seismic shift happening at our table. My father stared at me like he was seeing a stranger. In many ways, he was the daughter he thought he knew, uncertain, drifting, unsuccessful by his metrics, had never really existed. At least, not for many years. "I don't understand," he finally said, and for the first time, I heard something besides judgment in his voice. Confusion, perhaps. Maybe even a hint of regret. Why go to such lengths to hide your success? What purpose did that serve? It was a fair question. One I had asked myself many times over the years. The answer had evolved as I had, but the core remained the same. At first, it was fear, I admitted. Fear that you would dismiss it, call it a phase or a fluke. Then it became habit. And eventually. I paused, searching for the right words. Eventually, it became a test. I kept waiting for you to ask real questions about my life, to show genuine interest in what I was building. But you never did. You were so certain you knew who I was and what I was capable of that you never bothered to look deeper. My mother wiped away a tear. "We thought you were struggling. All this time, we've been worried about you." I was struggling, I said gently. Just not in the ways you imagined. Running a company is the hardest thing I've ever done. There were days I could have used my father's business advice or my mother's emotional support. But I couldn't ask without revealing everything, and I wasn't ready for this conversation. "So why now?" my father asked. "Why let us find out like this?" I hadn't planned for the waiter's recognition, but perhaps the universe had forced my hand for a reason. The secret had become a weight, one I hadn't realized was so heavy until the prospect of setting it down became real. "Because I'm tired," I said honestly. Tired of being two different people. Tired of downplaying my achievements when there's something I should be proud of. Tired of perpetuating the idea that I'm somehow less capable than I actually am. I reached into my bag and pulled out a business card, sliding it across the table. My name, embossed in silver. CEO and founder, Horizon Innovations. This is who I am, Dad. Not who you think I should be, or who you expected me to become. Just me. And for once, I'd like you to see that person clearly. My father stared at the business card like it might burst into flames. His fingers traced the embossed letters of my title, CEO and founder, with something between confusion and disbelief. My mother reached for it next, holding it delicately as if it were a rare butterfly that might fly away. Horizon Innovations, she read aloud. "I thought you worked for TechSphere." "TechSphere was our first major client," I explained. "I never actually said I worked for them. You just assumed." My father's jaw tightened. 5 years of deception. Then, deliberate deception. Jake returned with menus, glancing nervously between us. "Should I give you folks a few more minutes?" "Yes," all three of us said in unison. When he left, my father leaned forward. "I want to understand this, Olivia. Walk me through exactly how this happened." It wasn't the reaction I'd expected. Not anger or dismissal, but a demand for information. Data. Facts. The accountant in him needed to reconcile the ledger of who his daughter was versus who she'd become. So I told them. Everything. From the beginning. Stanford wasn't just liberation. It was revelation. For the first time, I was surrounded by people who didn't see ambition as something to be tempered, especially in women. My freshman roommate, Zoe Chen, came from a family of entrepreneurs in Taiwan. Her parents hadn't just encouraged her dreams, they'd expected them. "Your father thinks being an employee is safer than being a founder?" She'd asked one night, genuinely puzzled after I'd gotten off a tense call with home. "But employees get laid off all the time. At least as a founder, your destiny is in your own hands." It was a perspective that had never been voiced in the Bennett household, where stability was prized above all else. Then came Professor James during my sophomore year. He taught innovation economics and had founded 3 companies before turning to academia. On the first day of class, he made an announcement that changed everything for me. "Look around," he said. "Statistically, only about 8% of you will ever start your own company. Not because the rest lack ideas or talent, but because they lack courage. Entrepreneurship isn't about being smarter than everyone else. It's about being willing to look foolish, to fail publicly, and to get up and try again while everyone is still watching." I stayed after class that day, hovering near his desk until the other students had left. "Professor James? I was wondering if you could recommend some additional reading on startup formation." He studied me for a moment. "Are you planning to start something, Ms. Reynolds?" "I'm exploring the possibility," I answered carefully. "Don't explore. Decide." His voice was firm but not unkind. "Explorers observe. Founders build. If you're serious, come to my office hours with a problem you want to solve, not a book you want to read. That night, I made a list of every business problem I'd observed while working part-time at my father's accounting firm during high school. The inefficiencies, the communication gaps, the repetitive tasks that drained everyone's time and energy. 3 days later, I walked into Professor James's office with a crude mock-up of a platform that would eventually become Horizon's flagship product. "This is terrible," he said bluntly, reviewing my sketches. My heart sank. "But the problem you're trying to solve is excellent," he continued, surprising me. "Most students come in with elegant solutions to problems nobody has. You've identified a real pain point. Now you just need to build a better solution." He became my first mentor, introducing me to coding boot camps, design thinking workshops, and eventually, to Marcus Washington in the computer science department. Marcus was brilliant, socially awkward, and brutally honest. When I explained my idea, he laughed. "You want to revolutionize business software with no coding experience? Good luck with that." "I don't need luck," I replied, surprising myself with my own conviction. "I need a technical co-founder who can see the potential." He stared at me for a long moment. "Learn to code first. Build a prototype. If it's not completely awful, maybe we'll talk again." So I learned. Nights, weekends, between classes. I took online courses, attended hackathons, and slowly, painfully built a rudimentary version of what I envisioned. 6 months later, I showed it to Marcus again. "This is still pretty bad," he said, scrolling through my code. "But not as bad as I expected. You're persistent. I like that." By junior year, Marcus was officially on board. Zoe joined next, bringing her marketing brilliance and relentless energy. We called ourselves Horizon, because that's where we were always looking. While other students partied, we huddled in the 24-hour library, refining our business model. When summer came, instead of internships at prestigious firms, we worked out of Zoe's cousin's garage, living on instant noodles and ambition. The first version of our software was clunky but functional. We offered it free to small businesses in exchange for feedback. Most ignored us. Some tried it and abandoned it. A few stuck with us, providing the crucial insights that would shape later iterations. Senior year arrived with a prototype we were finally proud of, but no money to scale. That's when I faced my first real crisis of confidence. "Maybe I should take that job offer from Goldman," I told Zoe and Marcus one night. We were sitting on the floor of our makeshift office, surrounded by empty coffee cups and whiteboards filled with code. "Just for a few years. Build some savings. Make connections, then come back to this." Marcus threw a crumpled paper at me. "Coward." "Realistic," I countered. "We're about to graduate with debt and a product that's not ready for market. So get it ready," he shrugged. "What's the alternative? Spending the next decade pretending to care about making rich people richer at Goldman while our idea dies on the vine?" Zoe, always the pragmatist, offered a middle path. "We apply to accelerator programs. If we get in, we go all in. If not, we reconsider." We submitted applications to 5 top accelerators, each requiring exhaustive business plans, financial projections, and product demonstrations. 4 rejected us outright. The 5th, InnovateX, invited us to pitch in person. The night before our presentation, I called home. It was a mistake. "Dad, I have this opportunity tomorrow. A pitch competition of sorts. For that software thing you've been tinkering with." His voice carried the familiar note of indulgence one might use when discussing a child's art project. "Yes. If we're selected, we get seed funding and mentorship. And if you're not? Then I'm not sure. Maybe I take the Goldman offer." He perked up at that. "Goldman? Why haven't you mentioned this before?" "That's a real opportunity, Olivia. Prestigious. Stable. But the startup could be a gamble," he finished for me. "Look, it's good you've explored this entrepreneur phase. Shows initiative. But it's time to think about building a real career now." Thomas was already managing client accounts at your age. I hung up feeling deflated, my confidence evaporating. That night, I rewrote our pitch deck, replacing our bold vision with safer, more modest goals. When Zoe and Marcus saw it the next morning, they were horrified. "What is this?" Zoe demanded. "We went from revolutionizing business operations to incrementally improving workflow efficiency? Who are you and what have you done with Olivia?" "I'm being realistic," I defended. "The original was too ambitious." Marcus closed his laptop. I'm not pitching this. Either we go in with our real vision or I walk. We'll get rejected, I argued. Then we get rejected being ourselves, he countered. Not this watered-down version of what we believe in. Faced with their conviction, I realized what had happened. One phone call with my father had made me doubt everything we'd built. I'd internalized his limited vision for me so completely that I was ready to sabotage our chance before we even had it. You're right, I admitted. Let's use the original deck. We pitched our hearts out that afternoon. When the judges asked about our seemingly audacious market projections, I didn't backpedal. Instead, I outlined exactly how we would achieve them, step by challenging step. You're either delusional or visionary, one judge commented afterward. Time will tell, I replied with more confidence than I felt. A week later, we got the call. We were in. $50,000 in seed funding and 3 months of intensive mentorship. I called my parents with the news, expecting at least cautious enthusiasm. Instead, my father focused on what I was giving up. Goldman will rescind their offer if you delay, he warned. This accelerator is a detour, Olivia. Think carefully. I declined Goldman the next day and threw myself into InnovateX with everything I had. Those 3 months were transformative. We refined our product, clarified our market position, and learned how to speak the language of investors. By demo day, we had a working product with paying customers, not many, but enough to demonstrate traction. When the opportunity came to pitch to a room full of venture capitalists, I stepped onto the stage feeling strangely calm. This wasn't just about the business anymore. It was about proving something to myself. I didn't mention that part to my parents as I recounted the story across the restaurant table. Some things were still too raw, too personal to share. 3 VCs expressed interest after that pitch, I continued instead. 2 offered terms that would have required us to give up too much control. The third, Artemis Ventures, saw our vision clearly. They invested $2 million for a 15% stake. My father whistled softly. $2 million on a concept? On a team, I corrected. With a working product and paying customers. Venture capital isn't charity, Dad. They believed we could deliver returns. And did you? His tone was different now, less dismissive, more genuinely curious. We grew 300% year-over-year for the first 3 years, I said simply. Last year, we hit $22 million in annual recurring revenue. My mother's eyes widened. That's more than your father's firm makes. An uncomfortable silence followed her observation. My father shifted in his seat, and I saw something flicker across his face, pride, perhaps, mixed with something less pleasant. Jealousy? Confusion? It was hard to tell. And throughout all this success, he finally said, you didn't think to share any of it with us. I tried, in the beginning, I admitted. Remember when I called about getting into the accelerator? You called it a detour. After that, it just seemed easier to keep my world separate. But why maintain the pretense of struggling, my mother asked. All those times we offered to help financially, thinking you were barely making ends meet. The truth was complicated. Part of me had enjoyed their misconception, it meant they couldn't take credit for my success or claim it was due to their support. Another part had been afraid that once they knew, they would somehow taint it, diminish it, or worse, try to control it as they had so many aspects of my life. I think I wanted to succeed or fail on my own terms, I finally said. Without your expectations shaping how I felt about either outcome. My father looked wounded by this. We only wanted what was best for you. No, I said gently but firmly. You wanted what you thought was best for me. There's a difference. He opened his mouth to argue, then closed it again. For perhaps the first time in my life, my father was considering that he might be wrong. Jake returned, somehow sensing the moment was right to take our orders. My father, usually decisive to a fault, stared blankly at the menu as if it were written in a foreign language. My mother ordered for both of them, another small shift in the family dynamic that wouldn't have happened before tonight. When Jake left again, my father cleared his throat. Your company, Horizon. Tell me about it. What exactly do you do? It was such a simple question, one that anyone might ask upon learning about a new business. But coming from him, it felt monumental. For the first time, he was asking about my work not to criticize or redirect, but to understand. So I told them about our platform, how it integrated previously siloed business functions, how it learned from usage patterns to become more intuitive over time. I explained our revenue model, our growth strategy, our challenges with scaling. We're considering an IPO next year, I concluded. The board thinks we're ready, but I'm not sure the timing is right with current market conditions. The board, my father repeated, testing the words. You have a board of directors. Yes. 5 members. I chair it. And they listen to you? Follow your guidance? The question revealed so much about how he still saw me, as the girl who needed guidance, not the woman who provided it. But there was no malice in his tone, just genuine bewilderment. They hired me to lead, Dad. That's what I do. My mother reached across the table again, but this time she took both our hands, creating a circle. I wish you had told us, Olivia. All this time, we could have been celebrating your achievements instead of worrying. Would you have celebrated, though? I asked quietly. Or would you have attributed it to luck, timing, or my co-founders? Would you have waited for it to fail so you could suggest I join the family firm as a fallback? My bluntness startled her. She withdrew her hands. That's not fair. Maybe not, I conceded. But it's how I felt. How you made me feel, for years. My father had gone very still. Is that really what you think of us? That we wanted you to fail? Not consciously, I said. But you never believed I could succeed on my own terms. You measured me against a standard I never chose and found me wanting when I pursued my own path. Our food arrived, creating a welcome pause in the increasingly tense conversation. We ate in silence for several minutes, each lost in our own thoughts. The restaurant had grown busier, the ambient noise providing cover for our family reckoning. I built my business from nothing, my father finally said, setting down his fork. My father was a factory worker. He thought accounting was a waste of a man's time. Playing with numbers instead of making something real, he called it. This was new information. My father rarely spoke about his own upbringing. When I told him I was opening my own firm, he laughed. Actually laughed in my face. Said I'd come crawling back within a year. He took a sip of water. I never did. Built a client list. Hired staff. Provided for my family. Proved him wrong. I waited, sensing there was more. I thought. He continued, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant, I thought I was supporting you by steering you toward proven paths. I didn't want you to face the ridicule I did. The doubt. The sleepless nights wondering if you'd made a terrible mistake. But that's exactly what entrepreneurship is, I said. Facing doubt. Taking risks. Making mistakes and learning from them. Yes, he agreed, surprising me. That's exactly what it is. And I wanted to protect you from it because it's brutal. But in doing so, I became the voice of doubt I had fought against in my own life. The realization seemed to hit him physically. He looked suddenly older, smaller somehow. I became my father, he said quietly. The very person I had promised myself I would never be. My mother wiped away tears. We never meant to make you feel you couldn't share your life with us, Olivia. We thought we were helping. I know, I said, and meant it. The anger I had carried for so long was still there, but alongside it now was understanding. They had failed me in many ways, but not from malice, from the misguided belief that their narrow vision of success would protect me from pain. I'm sorry, my father said, the words clearly unfamiliar on his tongue. I'm sorry I called you a failure. I'm sorry I didn't see who you really are. It wasn't a complete resolution. Years of patterns couldn't be undone in a single dinner. But it was a beginning, an acknowledgement that the dynamic between us needed to change. I'm sorry too, I offered. For the deception. You deserve to know the truth, even if it was difficult to share. Where do we go from here, my mother asked, practical as always. Forward, I suggested. With honesty. I'm not the daughter you imagined I would be. I probably never will be. But I'd like you to know the person I actually am, if you're willing to see her. My father nodded slowly. I'd like that. As we finished our meal, the conversation shifted to lighter topics, funny stories from my startup days, the challenges of managing a growing team, my plans for the company's future. For the first time, I spoke about my work without filtering or diminishing it. For the first time, they listened without judgment or redirection. When the check came, my father reached for it automatically. I've got this, I said, placing my credit card on the tray. Olivia, I can, Dad, I interrupted gently. I'm the CEO of a $75 million company. I can buy my parents dinner. A strange expression crossed his face, pride mixed with something like loss. Another shift in our dynamic, another small acknowledgement of who I had become while he wasn't looking. As we walked out of the restaurant, Jake called out, "Good night, Ms. Reynolds. Tell Marcus his algorithm recommendations were spot on." My father glanced at me. "Marcus? One of your co-founders?" "Yes. He comes from here sometimes for client meetings." "And he never mentioned any of this?" "I asked him not to. He respected my privacy." Outside, the evening air was cool and clear. We stood awkwardly on the sidewalk, none of us quite ready to end the night but unsure how to prolong it. "Would you like to see my office?" I offered impulsively. "It's just a few blocks away. We opened a satellite location here last year to serve regional clients." My mother's face lit up. "We'd love that, wouldn't we, Richard?" My father nodded, but as we began walking, he held back slightly. I slowed my pace to match his. "All this time," he said quietly, "you were building something remarkable, and I was too busy judging the path to see the destination." It wasn't quite an apology, but from my father, it was extraordinary. An admission of error. A recognition of my achievement. Perhaps even the beginning of respect. "It's not too late," I told him, "to see it now." As we approached the sleek glass building that housed Horizon's regional office, I felt a curious blend of vulnerability and pride. For years, I had kept these worlds separate, my family and my company, my past and my present. Tonight, they would finally merge. I took a deep breath and reached for the door. I swiped my key card at the entrance, and the glass doors slid open silently. The security guard looked up from his desk, surprise registering on his face when he saw my companions. "Evening, Ms. Reynolds. Working late again?" "Just giving my parents a tour, Michael. This is Patricia and Richard Bennett." Michael stood and extended his hand. "It's an honor to meet you both. Your daughter runs a tight ship around here." My father shook his hand, a bemused expression on his face. "So we're learning." The lobby of Horizon's satellite office wasn't grand by Silicon Valley standards, but it was impressive nonetheless. Minimalist furnishings in our signature blue and gray. Our logo, a stylized horizon line with a rising sun, illuminated on the wall behind the reception desk. Awards and press mentions displayed tastefully in glass cases. My mother gravitated toward them immediately. "Fast Company's most innovative companies?" "Olivia, this isn't a museum display case." "We were number 12 last year," I said, downplaying it slightly. "We're hoping to crack the top 10 this year." My father was studying the financial growth chart mounted near the elevator. "These numbers are quarterly revenue." "Yes. Each bar represents 3 months." He traced the rising pattern with his finger. "Remarkable consistency. Not just growth, but sustainable growth." It was exactly the kind of observation an accountant would make, and I felt an unexpected surge of pleasure at his professional assessment. That's been our focus. Lots of startups can grow quickly by burning through venture capital, but we wanted to build something that could stand on its own. The elevator arrived, and I pressed the button for the 4th floor. As we ascended, I watched my parents' reflections in the polished doors. My mother looked openly proud, smiling and standing taller than usual. My father's expression was harder to read, thoughtful, perhaps, with his brows slightly furrowed as if working through a complex equation. The doors opened to our main workspace. At this hour, most employees had gone home, but a few dedicated souls remained, hunched over computers or gathered in glass-walled meeting rooms. The open floor plan showcased our collaborative culture, flexible seating arrangements, whiteboard walls covered in diagrams and code snippets, a kitchen area stocked with healthy snacks. "This is where the magic happens," I said, gesturing to the space. About 30 employees work from this office, mainly in sales, customer support, and regional client management. A young woman with purple-streaked hair looked up from her desk and waved enthusiastically. "Olivia. I thought you were at dinner with." Her voice trailed off as she noticed my parents. "Family," I finished for her. Emma bounced over, her energy palpable even after what had clearly been a long day. "It's so great to finally meet you. Olivia talks about you all the time." I shot her a warning glance, but she continued undeterred. "Seriously, whenever we're discussing business decisions, she's always like, my father would approach this from a risk management perspective, or my mother would focus on the human element here." Emma grinned. It's like you've been phantom advisors to the company. My parents looked startled, and I felt heat rising to my cheeks. While I had compartmentalized my worlds, apparently they had bled together in ways I hadn't fully acknowledged. I may have borrowed some of your wisdom over the years, I admitted. Dad's analytical approach to problems. Mom's insight into people's motivations. You never mentioned that, my father said quietly. It was easier to apply your lessons than to explain where I was applying them. Emma, sensing the emotional undercurrent, excused herself tactfully. I should finish this interface mock-up before tomorrow's client meeting. Lovely meeting you both. As she bounced back to her desk, my mother touched my arm. She seems to really admire you. Emma's brilliant. She could work anywhere, but she chose us because she believes in what we're building. I led them through the office, pointing out different departments and explaining our workflow. My father asked surprisingly insightful questions about our financial models and growth strategy. My mother was more interested in the team dynamics and company culture. Do all these young people report to you? She asked as we passed a cluster of desks. Ultimately, yes, though we have a management structure. I try to maintain an open-door policy, but with nearly 90 employees across 3 locations, I can't be directly involved in everything anymore. 3 locations? My father raised an eyebrow. San Francisco headquarters, this office, and a smaller development team in Austin. We reached a corner office with glass walls and a spectacular view of the city skyline. My name was etched on a small plaque beside the door. This is yours? My mother sounded impressed. When I'm in town, yes. I unlocked the door and ushered them inside. The space was neat but clearly functional, dual monitors on the desk, industry reports stacked in orderly piles, a small conference table for meetings. Personal touches were minimal but meaningful, a framed photo of our founding team on the day we secured our first major investment, a small jade plant that had somehow survived my irregular visits, a handcrafted paperweight from a grateful early client. My father walked slowly around the perimeter, taking it all in. This is real, he said, more to himself than to us. All of it. Did you think I was making it up? I asked, only half joking. No, not that. It's just. He struggled to find the words. Seeing it makes it concrete. You've built something substantial here, Olivia. Something that exists in the world and affects people's lives. Coming from him, it was high praise indeed. I felt a tightness in my throat. Would you like to see what we actually do? I asked, moving to my computer. The product itself? My father nodded eagerly, and I gestured for him to take my chair. I logged into our demonstration environment and pulled up the dashboard of our flagship platform. This is Horizon Core. It's what we're known for, an integrated business operations platform that brings together everything from inventory management to customer relationships to financial reporting. I guided him through the interface, explaining how it worked and the problems it solved. To my surprise, he caught on quickly, asking pointed questions about specific features. This would have saved me hundreds of hours if it had existed when I was building my practice, he admitted. The way it connects different business functions, it's elegant. That was the goal. Most businesses waste so much time trying to reconcile information across different systems. We wanted to create a single source of truth. My mother had wandered to the window, gazing out at the city lights. All those years at Stanford, when we thought you were just studying, you were creating this? The idea started there. The actual building came later. There were many iterations, many failures along the way. You never mentioned the failures, my father noted. Would you have seen them as learning experiences or evidence that I was on the wrong path? He winced slightly. Fair point. A knock at the door interrupted us. A tall man with salt and pepper hair and wire-rimmed glasses poked his head in. Sorry to disturb you, Olivia. I saw the lights on and, oh, you have company. Robert, perfect timing. Come meet my parents. Mom, Dad, this is Robert Alvarez, our CFO and one of our earliest investors. Robert entered with a warm smile, shaking hands with both my parents. It's a pleasure to finally meet you. Your daughter is quite the force of nature. My father straightened, slipping automatically into his professional persona. You're the financial officer? I'd be interested to hear your perspective on the company's position. Dad, I warned, this isn't a due diligence meeting. Robert laughed. It's fine, Olivia. I'm always happy to talk about our financial health, it's one of my favorite subjects. He turned to my father. The short version is that we're in an extremely strong position. Profitable for 7 consecutive quarters, debt-free, with a diverse client base across multiple industries. Olivia has insisted on responsible growth from day one, which wasn't always popular with other investors. Responsible growth, my father repeated, glancing at me with newfound respect. That's not the typical startup mentality. Exactly why I invested, Robert agreed. Most founders her age were chasing user numbers without a clear path to revenue. Olivia presented the most disciplined business plan I'd seen in years. I nearly doubled my intended investment after our first meeting. My mother rejoined us. From the window. It sounds like you believed in her from the beginning. Absolutely. Though I'll admit, she's exceeded even my optimistic projections. Robert turned to me. Which reminds me, the board wants to move up the discussion about the IPO timeline. Wilson's pushing for Q1 next year. That's too aggressive, I responded automatically. We need to strengthen our enterprise client base first, and there are still some regulatory hurdles with the international expansion. Robert nodded. That's what I told him, but you know Wilson. Always pushing for the next big milestone. My father was watching this exchange with fascination. Here in my professional element, I was different, confident, decisive, unequivocal in my opinions. There was none of the hesitation or deference that had characterized our family interactions for years. IPO, he said thoughtfully. That's a significant step. And one we won't take until we're fully ready, I assured him. Going public would give us capital for expansion, but it also comes with increased scrutiny and pressure for quarterly results. I won't sacrifice our long-term vision for a short-term stock pop. Robert checked his watch. I should head out. Early flight tomorrow back to San Francisco. Mr. and Mrs. Bennett, truly a pleasure. I hope you'll join us for the company holiday party this year, it's quite an event. After he left, my mother turned to me with wide eyes. Holiday party? We've never been invited to your work events. You've never known where I actually worked, I pointed out gently. But yes, you're welcome to come this year. It's usually in early December. We'll be there, she said firmly, leaving no room for discussion. My father had returned to the computer, scrolling through our product features with genuine interest. The client list is impressive. Several Fortune 500 companies. Those took years to land, I admitted. Enterprise sales cycles are brutal. But once they're on board, they tend to stay and expand their usage over time. He nodded, understanding the business model intuitively. Recurring revenue. The holy grail. Exactly. For a moment, we were just two business professionals discussing strategy, not father and daughter weighted down by years of misunderstanding. It felt surprisingly good. I should show you one more thing before we go, I said, leading them back to the elevator. We rode to the top floor, where I used my key card to access a rooftop garden that served as both a break area and event space. The night air was cool, and string lights twinkled overhead, illuminating comfortable seating areas and raised plant beds. The view of the city from here was breathtaking. We host client events here, I explained. But it's also a place for employees to decompress, have lunch, or just think. I believe in creating spaces that foster both productivity and well-being. My mother wandered among the potted plants, touching a leaf here and there. It's lovely, Olivia. So thoughtful. My father had gone to the edge, looking out over the cityscape. I joined him there, standing in companionable silence for a moment. I always thought you were chasing some unrealistic dream, he finally said. That you'd burn out or fail and come home defeated. I was prepared for that, to help you pick up the pieces, find a sensible path forward. He turned to face me. I never prepared for this, for you to so thoroughly prove me wrong. That wasn't my goal, I said honestly. I wasn't trying to prove you wrong. I was trying to prove myself right. And you have. There was no bitterness in his voice. Only a kind of wonder. Spectacularly so. I wasn't entirely alone, I corrected. I had my team, my investors, mentors like Professor James. But yes, there were many times I wished I could share certain moments with you both, the failures as much as the successes. Like what, my father asked. Tell us one moment you wished we had been part of. I thought for a moment, sifting through years of milestones and setbacks. Our first major product launch. We'd been working 80-hour weeks for months, living on caffeine and determination. The night before the release, we discovered a critical bug that could have compromised user data. What did you do? My mother asked, drawn into the story. We pulled an all-nighter. The entire team, from developers to marketers, crowded into the office. Some were debugging, others were preparing contingency communications, others were just keeping everyone fed and focused. By sunrise, we'd fixed it. The launch went perfectly, and none of our users ever knew how close we came to disaster. That sounds incredibly stressful, my father observed. It was. But it was also one of the most exhilarating nights of my life. The solidarity, the shared purpose, the collective triumph over seemingly impossible odds. I smiled at the memory. That morning, watching the sun rise over San Francisco with my exhausted team, I felt a clarity I'd never experienced before. This was exactly where I was meant to be, doing exactly what I was meant to do. And you wished we had been there, my mother said softly. Not physically, it was a bit of a war zone. But I wished I could have shared that feeling with you. That certainty. That sense of purpose. I looked at my father. You felt it too, I think. When you built your firm. He nodded slowly. Yes. There were moments, particularly in the early days. Challenges that seemed insurmountable until suddenly they weren't. The first time I made payroll for 5 employees and realized I was responsible for 5 families, not just my own. His eyes took on a distant look. It changes you. It does, I agreed. It makes you stronger in ways you never expected. We fell silent again, each lost in our own thoughts. The city hummed below us, a tapestry of lights and lives and stories unfolding. What happens now? My mother finally asked. With us, I mean. It was the question hanging over the entire evening. Could we bridge the chasm of misunderstanding that had grown between us? Could we forge a new relationship based on who we actually were, not who we had expected each other to be? We start over, I suggested. Not erasing the past, but not letting it dictate our future either. You get to know me, the real me, CEO and all. And I try to see you both more clearly too. I'd like that, my father said, surprising me with his readiness. I'd like to understand what you've built. Not to judge it, but to appreciate it. And we won't miss another holiday party, my mother added firmly. Or product launch, or whatever moments you'd like us to share. It wouldn't be simple. Years of patterns don't change overnight. But standing there on the rooftop, the city spread out before us like possibility itself, I felt something shift, a door opening to a future where my worlds weren't divided, where I could be wholly myself with the people who had known me longest. I'd like to show you our San Francisco headquarters someday, I offered. That's where most of the team works. It's quite something. We'll book flights, my mother said immediately. Next month? We could make a weekend of it. My father nodded his agreement. I'd like to meet your co-founders too. Zoe and Marcus, right? They must be exceptional people. They are. They've been asking to meet you for years. Years, he repeated, the word carrying the weight of missed opportunities. Well, better late than never, I suppose. As we prepared to leave, taking one last look at the view, my father cleared his throat awkwardly. I owe you an apology, Olivia. A real one, not just for tonight. I waited, giving him space to continue. I measured your choices against a standard that was never fair or relevant to who you are. I couldn't see past my own narrow definition of success. He met my eyes directly. I was wrong. And I'm proud of you, not just for what you've accomplished, but for having the courage to pursue it despite my doubt. The words I had longed to hear for so many years. They didn't erase the past, but they created space for something new to grow. Thank you, I said simply. That means more than you know. As we rode the elevator down, my mother squeezed my hand. Your grandmother would have been so proud, she whispered. She always said you had a spark that would light your own path. I hadn't thought about my grandmother in years, my mother's mother, who had passed away when I was in college. She had been an English professor in an era when female academics were rare, blazing her own trail against considerable opposition. Perhaps some of her spirit had found its way to me. In the lobby, Michael the security guard wished us good night. Outside, the evening had grown cooler, and my mother hugged her cardigan tighter around her shoulders. Our car is this way, I said, gesturing toward the parking lot. I can drive you back to your hotel. Actually, my father said hesitantly, I wondered if you might join us for a nightcap at the hotel bar. If you're not too tired. We have a lot of catching up to do. The invitation was tentative, almost shy, so unlike his usual definitive statements. It was an offering, a small step toward the new relationship we had discussed. I'd like that, I agreed. I'd like that very much. As we walked toward my car, I felt lighter somehow. The burden of deception I had carried for years was gone, replaced by the more complex but ultimately more rewarding weight of honest connection. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. How'd it go with the parentals? Still in one piece? I typed back quickly, better than expected. Actually showing them the office now. We'll call tomorrow with full debrief. His response came immediately, and oh way. Mind equals blown. Proud of you, boss lady. I smiled, slipping the phone back into my pocket. One conversation hadn't solved everything, but it had opened a door that had been firmly closed for too long. Walking between my parents now, I was neither the failure they had imagined nor the perfect CEO my team sometimes saw. I was simply Olivia, flawed, ambitious, determined, and finally, completely myself. As we reached my car, my father paused, looking back at the illuminated Horizon logo visible through the lobby windows. You know, he said thoughtfully, I always worried you were dreaming too big. But it turns out, I was thinking too small. In that moment, standing in the cool night air with the physical manifestation of my vision glowing behind us, I realized something important. Success wasn't proving my father wrong. Success was creating something meaningful enough to change his mind. It's never too late to think bigger, I told him, unlocking the car. For any of us. 6 months passed like a blur of motion and light. Autumn faded into winter, winter melted into spring, and through it all, a new relationship bloomed between my parents and me, tentative at first, then increasingly genuine. That night at the hotel bar had stretched into hours of conversation, my father asking questions about business strategies, my mother wanting to know about the people who had supported me along the way. For the first time, I spoke freely about both my triumphs and struggles, without filtering or diminishing either. The first year was the hardest, I admitted, swirling the last of my scotch. We almost went bankrupt twice. I didn't sleep more than 4 hours a night for months. Why? Didn't you call us? My mother had asked, her eyes reflecting both hurt and concern. The truth caught in my throat. Because I was afraid you'd say, I told you so. That you'd see it as confirmation I should have taken the safe path. My father had flinched slightly. Would we have said that? But his question seemed directed more at himself than at me. I don't know, I'd answered honestly. But I wasn't willing to risk hearing it. Not when I was already questioning everything myself. That night marked the beginning of something new, an adult relationship based on truth rather than expectations. My parents flew to San Francisco the following month as promised. I gave them the full tour of our headquarters, introduced them to Zoe and Marcus, and watched with a mixture of amusement and pride as my father engaged in a spirited debate with our lead developers about system architecture. Your dad knows his stuff, Marcus had commented afterward. Now I see where you get that analytical mind. Small moments of connection accumulated. My mother began forwarding articles about business leadership with thoughtful notes. Reminded me of your approach to team building, or this reminded me of what you said about ethical AI development. My father sent occasional emails with questions about our financial strategies or expansion plans, not to criticize, but to understand. To engage with my world on its own terms. Today, 6 months after that fateful dinner, I stood in the sleek conference room of our San Francisco headquarters, adjusting my blazer and checking my presentation notes one last time. Through the glass walls, I could see the packed room. Investors, board members, key employees, and financial analysts, all gathered for our annual company meeting. And in the front row, looking somewhat out of place but determinedly present, sat my parents. My father wore a new suit for the occasion. My mother had her hair styled differently, more modern, less the small-town look she'd maintained for decades. Small adjustments that spoke volumes about their effort to step into my world. Zoe appeared at my side, tablet in hand. Ready? We're at capacity out there. Even had to turn away some last-minute investor requests. As ready as I'll ever be. I replied, taking a deep breath. You've got this. You always do. She squeezed my shoulder, then gestured toward my parents. They look nervous enough for all of us. I laughed. First time seeing their daughter present to a room of financial power players. I think they're entitled to some nerves. Well, they're about to see why you're the one everyone in this industry wants to work with. Zoe straightened my collar slightly. Go make them proud. Again. Marcus was already at the podium when I entered, handling the technical introduction with his usual brilliant efficiency. The room quieted as I took the stage, all eyes focused on me, including the pair that had watched me grow up, but had never truly seen me in my element until recently. Thank you all for being here today, I began, my voice steady and confident. As we mark the 6th anniversary of Horizon Innovations, I'm excited to share not just where we've been, but where we're going. The presentation flowed smoothly: growth metrics, client acquisition numbers, product developments, market expansion plans. I outlined our vision for the coming year, including the much-discussed IPO that we had finally scheduled for the fourth quarter. Throughout it all, I found my gaze returning to my parents. My mother's eyes shone with unmistakable pride. My father listened with intense concentration, nodding occasionally at particularly impressive data points. Neither had seen me in this role before, commanding a room, fielding complex questions from venture capitalists, articulating a vision that would direct millions in investment. When the formal presentation concluded, the room erupted in applause. Board members approached with congratulations, investors with follow-up questions. Through the crowd, I saw my parents waiting patiently at the edges, not wanting to intrude on these important business conversations. After fulfilling my professional obligations, I made my way to them, accepting a warm hug from my mother. "That was remarkable, Olivia," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Truly remarkable." My father extended his hand formally, then seemed to think better of it and pulled me into an awkward but heartfelt embrace. "You were magnificent," he said gruffly. "The command you have of the material, the way you handled those questions about market projections, top-notch." Coming from him, it was the highest praise imaginable. "We have dinner reservations," I told them as the crowd began to disperse. "The whole executive team is joining us to celebrate. You'll finally get to meet everyone properly." "We'd be honored," my mother said, while my father nodded, looking slightly overwhelmed but pleased. As we gathered our things, Robert Alvarez approached with a small gift bag. "For the parents of our visionary CEO," he said with a warm smile. "Just a token of appreciation from the board." My mother accepted it with surprise. "That's very kind. But what are you thanking us for?" Robert glanced at me, then back to my parents. "For raising someone with the integrity and vision to lead a company like this. Not all brilliant minds come with a moral compass as strong as your daughter's. That doesn't happen by accident." My father cleared his throat, clearly moved. "We can't take credit for all of that." "Perhaps not," Robert agreed. "But at dinner tonight, I'd love to hear about young Olivia. What she was like before she became the business force we all know." As we walked toward the elevator, my father fell into step beside me, lowering his voice. "Your CFO seems to think we had something to do with your success." "You did," I said simply. "Just not in the ways you might think." He raised an eyebrow, waiting for me to continue. "Your standards for excellence, your attention to detail, your insistence on thinking through all possible outcomes, I apply those lessons every day. I just applied them to a different path than you expected." Something shifted in his expression. A softening, a recognition. I never thought of it that way. The restaurant was only a short walk from our offices, an upscale place with private dining rooms and impeccable service. As we approached the entrance, I noticed a familiar figure waiting outside, checking his watch with an impatient gesture. "James?" I called, surprised. "What are you doing here?" Professor James, my first mentor from Stanford, looked up with a grin. "You didn't think I'd miss this, did you? The announcement of my most successful student's IPO? Not a chance." He embraced me warmly, then extended his hand to my parents. "You must be the Bennetts. I've been wanting to meet you for years." My father shook his hand. "You're the professor Olivia mentioned. The one who challenged her to build rather than just study." "Guilty as charged," James admitted. "Though she didn't need much pushing. One of the most determined students I've ever had." "We didn't know," my mother said softly. "For years, we didn't understand what she was building." Professor James's expression was kind but direct. "But you're here now. That's what matters." Inside, our private room buzzed with energy. The executive team, key investors, and a few board members mingled over cocktails. As we entered, Zoe clinked a spoon against her glass to get everyone's attention. "The woman of the hour has arrived. And she's brought special guests. Everyone, meet Patricia and Richard Bennett, the parents of our fearless leader." A round of applause greeted them, causing my mother to blush and my father to stand a little straighter. What followed was a dinner unlike any we'd shared as a family. Stories flowed freely, professional achievements mingled with personal anecdotes, and my two worlds finally, completely merged. Halfway through the meal, Marcus tapped his glass. "I'd like to propose a toast. To Olivia, who saw what was possible when everyone else saw obstacles. Who built a company on principles when others chased quick profits. Who refused to compromise her vision even when it would have been easier to follow conventional wisdom." Glasses raised around the table. My mother wiped away a tear. My father's hand found mine under the table, squeezing gently. "And, Marcus," continued, to the Bennetts, who raised someone stubborn enough to prove all the doubters wrong, including, occasionally, themselves. A ripple of gentle laughter moved through the room, even my father joining in with good-natured acknowledgement. As the evening progressed, I found myself in a quiet moment with Professor James near the dessert table. "You've come a long way from that nervous sophomore who lingered after class," he observed. "Though I always knew you would." "I had moments of doubt," I admitted. "Everyone does. Success isn't about never doubting, it's about continuing. Despite the doubt." He nodded toward my parents, who were deep in conversation with Robert and Zoe. They seemed to have come around. "It's been a journey. For all of us. Family often is." He selected a small chocolate truffle. "Your father reminds me of my own. Critical, analytical, protective in his own rigid way. It took my first company acquisition for him to admit I might know what I was doing." I laughed. "Sounds familiar." Although in my case, it took a waiter recognizing me as a CEO to crack the facade. However it happens, that moment of recognition is powerful. Not because we need their approval, but because we want their understanding, I finished. He nodded appreciatively. "Exactly." As the evening wound down, guests began to depart. My parents, who had planned to fly home the next morning, lingered until only the core team remained. "We should let you get back to your hotel," I said, noticing my mother trying to stifle a yawn. "It's been a long day." "Before we go," my father said, uncharacteristically hesitant, "there's something I'd like to say." He glanced around at my colleagues. "To all of you, actually." The table quieted, everyone giving him their attention. "I'm an accountant," he began. "I've spent my career assessing value, calculating risk, measuring return on investment. It's made me cautious, perhaps too much so." He cleared his throat. "When Olivia chose this path, I saw only the risks. The potential for failure. The deviation from what I considered a safe and proven route to success." My mother reached for his hand, supporting him through this uncommon vulnerability. "What I failed to calculate," he continued, "was the value of vision. The return on courage. The growth that comes from pursuing what others can't yet see." His voice grew stronger. "Today, watching my daughter lead this company, articulate its future, and be respected by some of the brightest minds in the industry, I realized something important." He turned to face me directly. "I was wrong, Olivia. Not just about your potential for success, but about the very definition of success itself. You haven't succeeded despite taking a different path than I prescribed. You've succeeded because you had the wisdom to follow your own compass." The table was silent, the moment heavy with emotion. I felt tears threatening but managed to hold them back. "Thank you," I said simply, knowing he would understand that my gratitude was for more than just his words tonight. Later, as we stood outside the restaurant waiting for their car service, my mother embraced me tightly. "I wish we had seen it sooner," she whispered. "All that you were capable of. You see it now," I assured her. "That's what matters." My father, more reserved but equally moved, adjusted his tie, a nervous habit from my childhood. "We'd like to be more involved, if you'll have us. Not to interfere," he added hastily, "but to support. Perhaps I could review some of your financial projections for the IPO? Offer a second opinion?" The request was tentative, almost shy, so unlike the man who had once dictated my life choices with absolute certainty. It was an offering, a way to connect through his expertise rather than his authority. "I'd appreciate that," I said sincerely. "And Mom, we're developing a community outreach program for technology education in underserved schools. Your background in education would be invaluable for that committee." Her face lit up. "I'd love that. Truly." Their car arrived, and after final goodbyes, I watched them drive away, not as the disappointed parents of a wayward daughter, but as proud supporters of the woman and leader I had become. Zoe appeared at my side, linking her arm through mine. That was something special, she observed. The way your dad opened up at the end there. I never thought I'd see it, I admitted. He's not one for public declarations. Revolution comes in many forms, she said wisely. Sometimes it's building a multi-million-dollar company. Sometimes it's a father admitting he was wrong. Back in my apartment that night, I sat on my balcony overlooking the San Francisco skyline, reflecting on the long, winding path that had brought me here. My phone buzzed with a text from my father. Proud doesn't begin to cover it. Sleep well, CEO. 6 simple words that healed wounds I'd carried for years. The following week brought a new milestone, the official filing of our IPO paperwork. As tradition dictated, our executive team gathered for a celebratory toast after submitting the final documents. Champagne flowed, congratulations were exchanged, and the atmosphere vibrated with anticipation for this next chapter. To Horizon, Marcus proclaimed, raising his glass. From a garage startup to the New York Stock Exchange. To the team that made it possible, I countered, including everyone in my gaze. As the celebration continued around me, I slipped away to my office for a moment of quiet reflection. On my desk sat a new edition, a framed photo from the company dinner, my parents flanking me, all 3 of us smiling with genuine joy. Beside it, I'd placed my father's business card from his accounting firm and a small silver compass my mother had sent after returning home, with a note that read simply, always follow your own. My phone rang, Marcus calling from the celebration. We're taking a team photo for the press package. CEO's presence required. Be right there, I promised. Before leaving my office, I paused to send a quick text to my parents, just filed the IPO paperwork. Couldn't have done it without you, both the lessons that guided me and the challenges that strengthened me. Love you both. Their responses came almost immediately. From my mother, so proud we could burst. Can't wait to be there for the bell ringing. Already bought a new dress. From my father, more measured but equally meaningful, reviewing your prospectus now. Impressive growth projections. Solid foundation. You've built something remarkable, Olivia. Not just a company, but a legacy. I smiled, tucking the phone away as I rejoined my team. The journey ahead would hold new challenges, public scrutiny, market fluctuations, increased responsibilities. But I would face them as I had faced everything else, with determination, vision, and now, something I hadn't allowed myself before, the complete integration of who I was with my family and who I had become in my professional life. 3 months later, I stood on the balcony of the New York Stock Exchange, surrounded by my executive team, key investors, and my beaming parents. My mother had indeed bought a new dress for the occasion, elegant and modern. My father wore his best suit, though he still looked somewhat out of place among the Wall Street types. Yet there was pride in his posture, confidence in his handshake as he greeted financial analysts and business reporters. 1 minute until the bell, an exchange official announced. I turned to my parents. I want you both beside me for this. This is your moment, my father demurred. You and your team earned it. You're part of this story too, I insisted. Every part of it, even the chapters where we disagreed. I wouldn't be here without those challenges. He hesitated, then nodded, moving forward with my mother to stand on either side of me. As cameras flashed and the countdown began, I felt my father's hand on my shoulder, steady, supportive, proud. 10 seconds, called the official. Remember when you were 7, my father whispered suddenly, and you set up that elaborate lemonade stand with different flavor options and a loyalty punch card system? I laughed, surprised. You said it was unnecessarily complicated. It was, he admitted. And brilliant. I should have seen it then, that business mind working differently than mine, but no less effectively. He squeezed my shoulder. I see it now. 5 seconds. My mother gripped my hand. Your grandmother would have loved this moment. She always said you had a light that couldn't be dimmed. The official pointed at us. 3, 2, 1. Together, we reached for the bell, the sound ringing out across the trading floor as cheers erupted around us. Horizon Innovations was officially public, our stock symbol displayed prominently on screens throughout the exchange. In that moment, surrounded by my team, supported by my parents, I thought about the long journey from that restaurant where my father had called me a failure, not knowing he was sitting across from a CEO who had built something from nothing. But vision and determination. Later that evening, at our celebration dinner, I found a quiet moment with my father as others mingled around the bar. What are you thinking? I asked, noticing his contemplative expression. About perception. He answered thoughtfully. How we see others, how they see us, and how rarely those views align. He sipped his whiskey. For years, I saw you as someone who needed my protection, my guidance. I never saw that you were building something I could learn from. And now? Now I see a leader. A visionary. Someone who took a different path than mine and found greater heights because of it, not despite it. He set his glass down. But most importantly, I see my daughter, not as I wished her to be, but as she truly is. And that vision is far more extraordinary than anything I could have imagined for you. I blinked back tears, unexpected emotion. Rising. That means everything, Dad. He nodded, words seemingly inadequate for the moment. After a pause, he asked, "What's next for Horizon? Now that you've conquered this mountain?" I smiled, recognizing the question for what it was, not doubt or criticism, but genuine interest in my vision, my future. Expansion into Asia. New. Product development focusing on AI integration. Perhaps an educational foundation to help young women in technology. I took a breath. And personally, maybe slowing down enough to build more of a life outside the office. Balance, he said approvingly. Something I never mastered myself. It's never too late to learn new skills, I reminded him. For either of us. He raised his glass. To new lessons, then. And to the teacher who happens to be my daughter. As we rejoined the celebration, I caught sight of my reflection in the window, confident, accomplished, whole. No longer split between the dutiful daughter and the hidden CEO, but fully integrated as the person I had always been meant to become. 6 months ago, a waiter's innocent greeting had shattered the careful facade I'd maintained for years. What had seemed like a catastrophe at the time had become the catalyst for something precious: authenticity, understanding, and a relationship with my parents based on truth rather than expectations. Sometimes the most powerful transformations begin with moments of exposure, when the masks fall away and we stand revealed, vulnerable but real. My father had called me a failure at dinner, not knowing he sat across from a CEO. But in that painful revelation had come the opportunity for something authentic to grow, not just success as the world measured it, but success in being fully, unapologetically myself. And that, perhaps, was the greatest achievement of all. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell, so you don't miss any upload from us.